We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast. This is your host, Raven.
This is Emmett.
This is Chad.
And this is Jess.
Today's topic is on necromancy. And I have to tell you, I had a moment. I had a moment where I kind of confused necromancy with necrophilia. And I was like...
Online, they did say that was a common problem, so...
Yeah, I was like, should we really be talking about necrophilia? And then as I pondered it, I thought, yeah, there's nothing wrong with talking about it. But it's not tonight.
That's like the midnight podcast.
Yeah, we'll do that some other time. But today is necromancy, not necrophilia. So don't get it confused like I did.
That's like I got really excited when I was told I was going to become a sexagenarian 4 years ago, and it turned out to be nothing like I imagined at all. Nothing.
You're highly disappointed there?
Happy
Yes.
60th birthday.
Yeah, that's it.
So basically, when it comes to necromancy, there are some people that just don't even want to go there at all, because it can be a very dark topic. And so, you know, when it comes to researching for podcasts, we don't like it to be super structured because we don't want it to sound super structured. We want it to just be fun. We want to have a discussion. Sometimes we bounce all over the place. We do, depending on the topic. Sometimes we'll try to streamline it a little bit, but it's a little more fun to kind of bounce around a little bit.
So I'm going to start by bouncing around.
I wasn't done. Hang on just a second.
Well, you wanted to bounce.
Well, we're not bouncing yet.
She didn't throw the ball for it to bounce.
I still have the ball.
I can't bounce either, so...
Now I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay, then it's bounce to me.
Okay, fine.
About the positives and negative thing.
Oh, yes, yes.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jess.
You're welcome. I'm the topic go back to her, so.
She's the old me. I used to, what did they call me back in the day?
Granny Cinnamon.
No.
What in the world?
Oh my gosh, I'm kicking you off.
I got to hear the story behind that now.
Grace.
I wanted a nickname, and that's the nickname they gave me because it was my stripper name, but I'm old.
Granny Cinnamon.
Yeah, and I hated it.
That's such a good podcast.
It's out there now.
If I hit, well,
Again.
Emmett's trying to give me one really hard.
honest to
He's
be.
like, it's going to be McFly.
McFly. Yeah.
Okay, so
Anyways.
just FYI, when it comes to necromancy, I'm coming at it from the angle of it's bad, and it's not something that should be done. Very dangerous, very dark. I am not a proponent of necromancy. All right, now I will throw the ball to Chad.
Okay, so what necromancy is, the definition is the practice of magic that centers on the communication with the dead. So that's necromancy. So from that kind of a definition, that broad definition, a lot of what we do ghost hunting could be considered necromancy.
Closet necromancers.
That's right. Because we communicate with the dead. You with your dowsing rods, with the things that we do with the different devices and boxes, we're trying to get...
Pendulums.
Yeah, we're trying to get things. So in a way, we are performing necromancy.
Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate.
Because you're going to the dark side.
No. Well, probably, but if I go, I'm probably going to go to hell, so bring me cookies.
I'll probably be there with you.
So when I looked up the definition, it was, using magic or black magic to communicate with the dead through summoning or raising from the dead. So in my opinion, there's a little bit of a caveat. I do not do necromancy.
Because you're not raising the dead or using black magic.
Because I'm not summoning or raising them from the
Okay.
dead. So, and again, it's, how you want to look at it.
Jess will have something to say about that.
Let's hear what the science teacher says.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, because I was like, why do people want to do this, especially in the modern times? Because I looked out of the history and actually went on Reddit because everyone talks about everything there. And someone was saying like, hey, I'm interested in this. How do you do this? What do I do to do this? And the person answering was like, well, what is your intent? Do you want to work with your with the afterlife? Do you want to work with your ancestors? Do you want to honor the beloved deceased? All this stuff. And she was like, keep this in mind. Important thing to remember is that the dead are not your tools. The dead are not your tools, she said twice. I've known some beginner necromancers that have tried to use the deceased to build power and throw ghosty curses at people. If you want to curse someone, that's well and good, but wandering into a graveyard, nabbing some dirt without permission or proper respect, and then throwing it at someone, it didn't end well. So there's a lot more to it. I can get into a little bit, but basically, you're saying like you have to have so much respect for the dead, actually, for it. So
Well, and one thing kind of to catapult off of that is that, it says most of the places that I read anyway said, necromancy is very dangerous. And there's two reasons why it's very dangerous. First is because if you're actually raising the dead, which I believe only God can do, but they're pissed off. They've died. They've lived their life, whether it was long or whether it was cut off short, tragic, but they're at peace. And you wake them up and you disturb them. And, the idea behind necromancy is if you've raised them, then you have control over them and you can have them inflict stuff on living people. And they don't want to be called into the living world. They don't want to be ordered around. They want to rest in peace. So that's the one reason. The other reason is, are you actually raising the dead? Or are you just summoning a demon that's pretending to be the dead? And that's not good either.
I'm sure half the people that get into this like on a whim, they don't know what they're doing anyway, and opening doors that they have no idea what they're opening. And half of them probably just heard about it the day before.
And thought, wow, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
I am of the mindset, I'm 100% convinced, and you'll never convince me otherwise, that necromancy is all summoning spirits, because I do believe that the only person that can actually raise someone from the dead is God.
well, this right here kind of, they were talking about how like the modern version of it now is working with the energy of the dead, of reanimation like that way, just talking to their spirits and bringing them forth. It tries to avoid the brutality and discretion of burial sites, so they're kind of doing more of the spirit side than the actual like body parts. So maybe the definition is sort of changed to a modern way.
Or this
Right.
necromancy light.
I mean, they were saying it's like the actual ones. They have it in Afro-Brazilian, I think it said, like cultures. So it's apparently still a thing, more of that like older sense. But I think in America or wherever, like we have more of a modern version of that, and they're kind of translating it over to like, well, all along we've been connecting with spirits if you're going to do things like a pendulum or a dowsing rod or things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah. What I think is interesting is you see necromancy. It's very, very popular in movies. And I just wrote down the first three that came to my head, and I'm sure as we sit here we can come up with more. But Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Sauron was one of his titles, was the necromancer. And a little bit more on that was in, I think it's Tales of the Middle Earth, which was some of the documentation that Tolkien had written that then had been compiled by his son and wrote more information about Middle Earth and those things. He actually goes into it because in the original Lord of the Rings, Sauron is given the title of necromancer, but they never talk about him using necromancy itself of that specifically. But they did say in the notes that Tolkien had and that his son produced from Tales of Middle Earth was that was one of the things that he did was he would pull the spirits up and enslave them and take their knowledge.
Right. So the other one that came to mind, and you have to, in Lord of the Rings, and you have to help me remember, because I watch movies and it's fun, and then I'm done, and then I forget all about it. So help me here. But remember in Lord of the Rings when Frodo and Samwise are going through the marshes and they see all the people down in the water?
Yep, all the dead guys
All
and
the- yeah,
that
from the-
didn't decompose
Right.
in that documentary.
In that documentary, did they come back to life to fight, or am I getting that confused with Harry Potter, where there's the people floating in the water that do come up and try to
Grab
Well, I
them.
remember a video game with that too, so I think that whole theme is
Grabby spirit arms.
out of the water.
I don't remember in Lord of the Rings that they actually animate, but I do think that the hobbits were drawn into the water and then got entangled. But I don't think that the bodies actually animated to get them, but they did get tangled up in them as they got pulled in.
Well, Gollum was trying to trap them in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then obviously the next one's Harry Potter. When Harry and, I think this is in book 5, Harry and Dumbledore, they're trying to find the Horcrux, and they go into the cave and swim across, and Dumbledore says, "Don't touch the water," and he touches the water, and then all the dead people in the water, come to life. So there's necromancy right there. And then also the Mummy. The Mummy, where all the
Well, they say like
mummies.
zombie-related movies. Not all zombies, because some are like from diseases, but ones that it's like started from coming alive from whatever spiritual thing.
right.
Yeah, you can go way back on the zombie movies along those lines, and James Bond, Live or Let Die, back in the 70s or early 80s, that was a lot about zombies and the necromancy and the raising of the dead.
Yeah. Well, and you can even argue, are vampires necromancy because they're dead? Are they dead, or are they just unliving?
They're undead.
I'm just throwing that out there.
That's why there's so many interesting ways to like decipher it or how you want to say it is. That's why some people are like, I'm kind of okay with it because I think of it in this way. And people are like, I'm not okay with it because I think of it that way.
Now, one thing before we get too far away from it is it does say don't confuse necromancy with conjuring demons and spirits. In my mind, it's one and the same. But in some people's minds, there's a difference between reanimating the dead and conjuring up a spirit.
Well, and if you go back to some of the original Greek accounts of necromancy, which were some of the earliest in Homer's Odyssey, I think it was Odysseus, one of the things that he was required to do, or he did, was he needed to get information from the dead. And again, it wasn't looked at as an evil or dark practice at that point, but it was a way to get information from someone that had it, that had passed on. And there was a rite called Kekia, Kekya, where the dead are called upon to help tell the future. And that was the practice or the rite that they did in the Odyssey. And as I said, it was originally not seen as a dark form of magic, but just as a way to gain information.
Right. So necromancy in general is based on a belief that the dead know everything and can be commanded to do bidding and perform magical acts on living. And actually, in ancient Greece, it wasn't called necromancy. It was called evocators, because it literally meant caller of souls.
So they're working with like the spirit. So maybe it's kind of leaning towards that spirit energy conversation.
More of the summoning.
Now I'm reminded of that scene in Beetlejuice where they call him forth. They call the Maitlands forth. Remember? And I mean that fits the definition of necromancy.
Or maybe literally
perfectly.
saying his name 3 times and he came to life.
Or in Men in Black, when the alien is wearing the Egger suit.
Ew. Yeah.
Kind
The
of
Egger suit.
The Egger suit. That's one of my favorite lines.
My friend
Egger
growing
suit.
up used to imitate like those people talking with the gross skin face, and I'll never
So,
forget.
I don't know. The Egger suit might not be. Well, I guess it kind of is because it was reanimating. That would probably be a little more zombie-like, though. I don't know.
So one of the things is, when did kind of the idea of necromancy become taboo? And from what I researched on it, they said a lot of it came from the church in the Middle Ages. That
Oh, yeah.
before then, even before then, even the church did a lot of kind of the idea of necromancy from a standpoint of being able to communicate with the dead, and not really, it wasn't looked down upon. I don't know that you'd say it was sanctioned, but it wasn't taboo. But in the medieval ages, the church started looking down on it and
Yeah, I
making
have
it
a little
taboo.
bit about that.
Okay.
It says
so
in the
do
Middle
I. So you go
Ages,
ahead.
after the fall of Rome, necromancy was strictly forbidden by the church. This, of course, did not stop its practice. Surprisingly, many medieval necromancers were members of the clergy who believed they were invoking the help of God to conjure demons, angels, and spirits.
Yeah, and one of the things, they said that it was called Maleficum, Maleficium, Maleficum witchcraft, and it was an act of witchcraft with the intent of doing harm, and that was when the church really started coming down on it and making necromancy a taboo practice.
Right. So I found this part of it interesting. You remember I said I was going to kind of come at it from the angle of don't do this, it's bad. In the book of Samuel in the Old Testament, there's actually a really famous story about necromancy, where King Saul of Israel, he's going to have this big fight with the Philistines, and they're supported by David, right? And so Saul prayed, asked for guidance and divination from prophets. He didn't get any answer. So finally, he turned to necromancy and consulted a witch of Endor. And it said she was a Pythoness, which sounds kind of interesting. So he visited her in disguise, and, she did her ritual and conjured the prophet Samuel, apparently, from the dead. So this ghost comes, and he appears to Saul, robed as an old man, and he's pissed off because he, was called from his grave. And the ghost only had bad news for Saul. He says, hey, the Philistines are going to win. David's going to be king. Saul, you and your sons are going to be killed. And then the ghost went back to sleep. And true to prophecy, the next day, that's what happened. He was badly wounded. He committed suicide with his own sword. David became the king of Israel. So...
Yeah, one of the interesting things with the necromancy, it's known in both Christian, Jewish, and Arabic cultures. And the teachers teaching centered around necromancy is in all of those cultures. And three things that they, kind of believe can be achieved through necromancy, the practices: the gain of knowledge, making illusions, and the ability to manipulate the will of others.
Right. And one of the things I found interesting was even back in the times where it was, pretty popular, Plato condemned it. He called it a fraudulent practice and called for harsh, really harsh punishments for people who practiced it. He said this isn't like verbatim, okay. Necromancers do not really summon the dead, but engage in tricks. And then Christian opponents say that any spirit that appears is not the dead, but a demon masquerading as the dead, which I tend to
think more so of.
I tend to think that that's more what it is, but
it makes me think about, like, back in the day what they were saying it was and how today they're saying it's something a little different. Can words like that, can we change the definition of things over time and consider it something else? Or because that word originated from that type of thing, is it always that? And people are just trying to be like, no, really, it's fine because I just do this instead.
Well, if things can be brought into existence just by sheer number of people, thinking about it, and so obviously things can change over time too, I would think.
Well, one of the things that kind of, that I thought about while researching this is in the documentary Aladdin, the Disney version with Robin Williams. And the genie is, telling Aladdin, you got 3 wishes, but, there's rules. I can't make anybody fall in love. I can't raise the dead. There's 2 sides to every story. Genie, not raising the dead.
Yeah.
So... You remember that Simpsons episode where the kids come home and Homer's watching TV and they want to ask him something, and he's asking him, said, did you raise the dead? No. Okay. I don't care what you're doing.
Other than that.
As long as you're fed and you get home alive.
Just don't raise the dead.
Well, Emma, you were talking a little bit about a book, the Necromancy.
Oh, the Necronomicon?
Talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was interesting what you were saying.
Yeah, that's a book that it just keeps popping up, as you dig into it online. And it turns out that it's really a fictitious book. It was a product of H.P. Lovecraft's imagination. And, he encouraged other writers to write about his mythos and his world. And the other writers also referred to the book over time. I'm trying to think. I'm having a senior moment now. But back in the 80s, I worked for an amateur press that was devoted to that genre, Lovecraft writings and writings based on his mythos. And for a couple of years, I would do illustrations for this. And I just remember the Necronomicon popping up in some of these stories time after time after time.
To the point where it's assumed that it's a real...
That it's a real book. And publishers have put out books they've called the Necronomicon. And apparently no 2 publishers it's the same, So be careful if you find a copy of a book with that title, because know that... it's something that does not, date to antiquity. It's a product of the 20th century.
Well, then it also like bled into Dungeons and Dragons, and it's super.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When you look this stuff up, it's like Dungeons and Dragons. What about this folklore of Dungeons and Dragons? So
True. Yeah, I played Dungeons and Dragons in the early 70s too, and even then, you heard mention of it.
Yeah. And some of the other, Dungeons and Dragons, some of the modern folklore around necromancy and these things. We talked about Harry Potter and we talked about Lord of the Rings. A couple of others are like Mortal Kombat. In Mortal Kombat, there's Shang Tsung and Wang Shi, who are warlocks and sorcerers, and they raise the dead to make armies for their master to do their bidding. Again, Harry Potter, Lord Voldemort raising an entire army of dead skeletons and zombies during the First Wizarding War, which consisted mostly of those whom he had already murdered. Games of Thrones, the Night King, and the White Walkers.
Oh, I forgot about Games of Thrones.
Lots of modern.
makes really good stuff for TV. Is really.
Yeah, and you know what? The idea of it, I don't have a problem with on like a fictional basis because it's kind of cool.
Oh yeah, you think about it. What an awesome adversary! You go and you wipe out your enemy, and he raises all the people you just killed.
And now they're
they
on
come
my
back.
team.
Yeah, it's like
Haha.
what an antagonist. What someone that How do you deal with that?
Right. But I do have issues with people doing it in real life.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, you notice the recurring theme in all of it is it's used to control something, control somebody else, or control destiny, or control your own fate.
Or get information that you're not privy to.
Something you shouldn't normally have. Yeah. So it's always, not the purest of intentions.
Right.
If you're leaning towards that power, having power and making something do something, when you're doing like, the dowsing rods, in a way it's not that way because you're asking like, hey, is anyone here that wants to talk? Or it's more of like on if you'd like instead of like forcing.
Well, yeah, you're not compelling
Right.
any spirit to
or
do
summoning
anything.
or
Right.
And I think Raven, where you're talking about it from, no, we don't do summoning. We don't use the Ouija boards. We don't do things that bring things into our venues. We don't encourage.
You're not inviting it in.
No incantations or seances or.
I mean, my issues behind it are one, again, I believe that only God or people that have actual authority from God, like Jesus, prophets,
can raise the dead.
Two, I mean, you're bugging them. Leave them alone. Three, I just think that if you are raising the dead, I think it's an evil spirit, and I don't think we've got any business messing with it. So it's interesting. I mean, it is fascinating. I just don't want to do it, and I don't want to encourage anybody to do it. And
so this is a recommendation not to do it.
Correct, but it is an interesting topic to talk about.
Oh.
Now, that being said, I'm going to give you some scripture.
Uh-oh.
No, and I found this interesting. There's actually, I found a website that says there's 28 scriptures that have to do with necromancy. About half of them, I was like, I think you were just stretching for a good big number. So you're not going to get 28. But Isaiah 8:19.
Are we going to make a list?
Yes, this is actually
The list gets longer every time. Have you noticed?
Hey, I said I took half of these off, and I'm not going to read all of them. I just thought it was interesting.
So 28 is the amended list?
Your segment should be list of the day.
I need new friends. Okay. So Isaiah 8:19 says, when they say to you, consult the mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people consult their God? Should they consult the dead on behalf of the living? So it sounds like Isaiah is not too keen on it. Deuteronomy, there shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord, and because of these detestable things, the Lord your God will drive them out before you. Now, before you turn off this podcast because you do witchcraft, or a medium or a spiritist, we have discussed this before. There are spiritual gifts, and I don't want to count anybody's spiritual gifts. I think a lot has to do with intent and how you use those gifts.
And those are mentioned in Scripture too, but as a positive thing.
Right. So Samuel says, seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, behold, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor. And we talked about that story. Deuteronomy, one who casts a spell or a medium or spiritualist who calls up the dead. So again, don't turn the podcast off. Also in Deuteronomy, I have not eaten of it while mourning, nor have I removed any of it while I was unclean, nor offended of any, nor offered any of it to the dead. There was one that was really cool. Hang on, where did it go? Had something to do with frogs.
Well, frogs are cool.
They're green.
Hang on.
Blue, spotted, yellow.
Are these like Old Testament or New Testament or?
Most of them are old.
'Cause my
Testament,
question
but
is-
there's a few.
The one that Emmett was referring to, is that New Testament? Because it's like kind of a little bit different, like saying like, you know, your gifts are good with the spiritual gifts, but then again, don't do this stuff. So sometimes like Old to New Testament, sometimes it kind of redefines some things. I could be wrong because could be very illiterate.
It was
with that.
Corinthians, so
Yeah, these are about half and half.
Mm-hmm.
So this one,
frog sounds like Old Testament to me.
Yeah.
I'm just
Probably
yeah.
coming from the sky.
Yeah.
so this is Corinthians. No wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So that, you know, an evil spirit, a demonic
and he's the master of
entity,
deceit.
right, can, you know, appear as something else. In Isaiah, again, then the spirits of the Egyptians will be demoralized within them, and I will confound their strategy, so they will resort to idols and ghosts of the dead. I lost the frog one. That was the coolest one. Oh, here it is. Exodus. You're right, Old Testament.
Yay.
Doesn't get much older than Exodus.
Most frogs are in Exodus, I think.
So here's the first one. The Pharaoh called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same with their secret arts. And then also in Exodus 8:7, the magicians did the same with their secret arts, making frogs come up out of the land of Egypt.
Are there a lot of frogs in the desert areas or something? Because I feel
You
like
know, we have a toad. We live in Utah,
Yeah,
which is a
true.
desert, and we have a toad that has lived under our trampoline for years.
but frogs are in the water, and there's not a lot of water, right?
There's the Nile.
Okay, hey, yeah, they live by the Nile
And
usually.
everybody lives along the Nile.
That's true. Okay,
So,
my science brain was like, why is there a frog there? The Nile is, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome when we were there. I mean, just, you know, they'd have the marshes along the Nile.
that was surreal. I'm like, I am in the middle of the Nile River.
Where queens were.
I know. Cleopatra.
Did you feel like you were in a movie?
Nefertiti. Yeah, I actually kind of did.
Like Indiana Jones style situation.
Yeah.
Especially when the belly dancer was dancing.
You know, I had some awesome pictures of her, I thought, but then when I went to look for them, I just had one stupid one with her face covered. Those belly dancers are amazing.
Yeah, and the whirling dervish.
That's amazing, too. I would have thrown up after about 3 seconds, and he kept going for, like 20 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever get a chance to see a whirling dervish, it's pretty
Is that a
amazing.
spinning dancer person?
I didn't know that they were real.
Yeah.
The whirling dervishes? Okay, we're going off topic. Stop me after 3 minutes, Jessica.
Okay.
Whirling dervishes are a Sufi order of Muslims, kind of like they're Muslim mystics. And
Muslim mystics,
Yes.
right? Okay. It sounded like Muslim mystics, and I didn't know what a Muslim mystic was.
a Muslim
Sounds like a theater troupe or something.
mystic.
Like mystic, like
Men,
Like spiritual
mental-
mystic, yes.
okay.
Men don't listen. That's what it is. Okay,
They can't decipher our awesome speed of talking.
I know. It's because I'm so intelligent. I talk fast. Got to get it all.
Got to get it all out.
Exactly. See?
Is
she
your
gets
3
it.
minutes up? Is there 3 minutes up here?
No, my 3 minutes starts right
No,
now.
it hasn't even been a full minute.
I have to explain whirling dervishes because they're cool. So it's a Sufi order of the Muslim mystics. And they're actually like banned on the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia. They don't like you. But they feel like you communicate with God through dancing and whirling, and they feel like you can get like a John Denver.
This
like
is the
a-
Grateful Dead.
like a natural high by spinning.
They're
and-
just literally spinning in space really fast.
yeah. I mean, they spin and they dance. And
That's cool.
Oh,
so
wow.
I mean, it's
I feel like
actually
I've seen it and not knew what it was.
right. They wear kind of the dome hats
Mhm.
and they got the big round, and it's actually a way that they communicate with God. It's a religious
Practice.
practice.
Wow.
I've heard the expression. I always thought it was,
They
something mythological or like a Tasmanian
I thought it
devil
was
or
just
something.
dancing tradition.
No,
they
and
were quite the warriors also.
They were fantastic warriors. They were one of the leading regiments during the Ottoman period, the early of the Ottoman period. I didn't research this. So I'm just remembering from class last semester. But the other thing that's really interesting about them just went away.
Well, their dancing reminds me of like native indigenous people. Their dances are, definitely talking to spirits, like I guess
Well,
they're
that's
God.
a good point. Yeah.
So maybe that's, it's a more normal thing.
What else was I going to say about this?
Not normal, because it is normal, but out of the ordinary.
There's something else cool about them. I don't remember. But they were fantastic warriors. And for a while, they were like the Sultan's main warriors.
And I've got a tangent to go off that. The Christmas song, You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, is sung by the Whirling Dervishes.
But they weren't Whirling Dervishes.
I
They
know,
just
that
liked
was
the
just
name.
They
the name of
stole
the
the
group.
name.
Yes.
That's got to be bad.
No, I remember. So this is it. A lot of people know the poet Rumi, R-U-M-I.
Okay.
Um,
I'm not one of those people.
well,
None of us are.
Go ahead.
You get to be the knowledger.
if you are listening to this and you know who Rumi are, thank you. Rumi is, then thank you for being into poetry. No, he's really, really popular, and I bet you know a lot of his sayings that you don't realize it. But Rumi, he's the one that kind of started the Whirling Dervishes.
Okay.
So if you're cultured and you realize who Rumi is, you will appreciate that little fact. So I just offended the entire room.
We're not cultured, sorry.
Where does that come from? Oh, that's just from Toy Story. I like using that. You uncultured swine.
Which one? Number
the
1,
pig?
2, or 3?
But one, yeah. So, the documentary
Yep.
of culture. Okay. Sorry. Back
Your
to
3
necromancy.
minutes is up.
Wait, I just looked at my watch that's not there. It is exactly been 3 minutes. Good job.
See how good I am? Okay.
Did we finish the necromancy?
Yeah, I got nothing else.
That's it for
Don't
necromancy?
do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Be curious, but don't do it.
I mean, revere your dead, but just let them be
Don't
dead.
summon them.
Don't summon
Don't
them.
summon them for the wrong, for
Any reason.
any reason other than, just communicate with them. But
Wait till the resurrection and you can chat with them then, okay?
when you get resurrected right alongside them.
If they're around to chat and you can ask them.
But I can still use my ovilus, right?
Yeah, that's asking.
Okay,
They're
yeah.
choosing. We're not making them.
Yep. Fair enough.
Maybe they're around because they got something to say.
Well, stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Till next time.
Hey, have a great night.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.